I must say that the communist government in China today is not the same as the people of China. They're reaching for and using methods that have created challenges for the United States and for the world. And we collectively, all of us, need to confront these challenges from the PRC head on and along each of the many facets. There are many opportunities to be sure, but it is no longer realistic to ignore the fundamental differences between our two systems and the impact that those two systems have, the differences in those systems have on American national security. Frankly, we've been slow to see the risk of China, the risk that it poses to American national security, because we wanted friendship with the People's Republic from the very start, and because we, as Americans, always continue to hope for that. But frankly, in our efforts to achieve this goal, we accommodated and encouraged China's rise for decades, even when that rise was at the expense of American values, Western democracy and security, and good common sense. We downgraded our relationship with our longtime friend, Taiwan, on the condition that the Taiwan question would be resolved peacefully to normalize relations with Beijing. We all too often shied away from talking directly about the human rights issues there and American values when they came into conflict. And we downplayed ideological differences even after Tiananmen Square massacre and other significant human rights abuses. We encouraged China's membership in the World Trade Organization and other international organizations, premised on their commitment to adopt market reforms and abide by the rules of those organizations. And all too often, China never followed through. We hesitated and did far less than we should have when China threatened its neighbors like Vietnam and like the Philippines, and when they claimed the entire South China Sea. Now we know, too, that China threatens American freedoms by demanding our companies self-censor to maintain access to that Chinese market. We've all seen the stories recently of the NBA. The truth is Beijing ought to be free to run its own PR campaign. They're a sovereign nation. But if we disagree, our companies ought to be permitted to have that disagreement. Silencing dissent simply is not acceptable. We know, too, that Beijing entwines its neighbors and others in its state-led economic model, often closing deals with bribes, often trapping many in debilitating debt levels, threatening their own sovereignty. And now we know, too, and we can see, China's regime trampling the most basic human rights of its own citizens, the great and noble Chinese people. We've seen this in Hong Kong, where they need to live up to their promises and commitments, and we've seen it in the gross human rights violation of ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. We know, too, that the Chinese Communist Party is offering its people in the world an entirely different model of governance. It's one in which a Leninist party rules and everyone must think and act according to the will of the communist elites. That's not a future that I want. I think it's not a future that anyone in this room wants. It's not a future that other democracies want. And it's not a future that the people of China, the freedom-loving people of China everywhere, don't want this model. The Chinese Communist Party is a Marxist Leninist party focused on a struggle and international domination. We need only listen to the words of their leaders. I'll discuss, too, how they interfere with the things we take most for granted here in the United States. The party's intelligence agencies, the United Front work, and its propaganda outlets have embarked on a global campaign to change public opinion in favor of Beijing. We want to preserve our freedoms, our freedom of speech, and we want to make sure that information flows freely everywhere. And I'll discuss, too, the impact on the international order. Beijing is actively creating its own international space, and it participates in international organizations to validate its authoritarian system and spread its reach.